Welcome to UnJustified, where we always cover the truth, the facts, the good, the bad, the ugly, on an unbiased and sometimes very unpopular opinion. If you're not already a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe now and hit the notification bell, and that way you will receive all of our upcoming videos. Thank you so much for being here, and we do hope you enjoy today's video. Mary Vincent was born in 1963. She grew up in Las Vegas, one of 7 children to parents Herb and Lucy Vincent. Her parents worked in the casinos. Her mom, Lucy, was a blackjack card dealer, and her father, Herb, he was a mechanic and a repairman for the slot machines. Mary loved to dance. She also danced competitively, and she dreamt of traveling the world someday as a ballet performer. In 1978, and while her parents were going through a rough patch, getting a divorce, Mary, being 14 years old, had started to be just a bit rebellious. She was skipping classes at school and ran away from home with her boyfriend, and they was living in his car for a while until they were found and he was arrested for statutory R, being because Mary was underage. After this incident happened and Mary was brought back home, it wasn't long before she was hitting the road again. This time she was hitchhiking rides. And as odd as it may seem today, hitchhiking was a very common method of getting around for many people without cars back then, especially with the teenagers. For a short while, Mary was staying off in her uncle. He lived in Soquel, California. But on the morning of September the 29th of 1978, Mary woke up and she was ready to venture out again. She was homesick. Her plan was to hitchhike a little over 400 miles back to her own home in Las Vegas. So as Mary got on the freeway, held up her sign that said headed south, there was 2 other hitchhikers that was behind her just a ways. Eventually they caught up. A van pulled over, and it was a bald, middle-aged man. He had a bare belly, and he was wearing like a light blue jumpsuit. This guy's name was Lawrence Singleton, better known as Larry. The van pulled over, and the hikers ran up to the van, and Larry asked them where they were headed. Well, Mary told them she was headed back home, back to Vegas, and the other 2 hikers said where they were heading, and Larry told him, well, he only has room for 1. Well, this was quite odd, seeing that it was a van, and it didn't really look like there was anything in the van. So they all looked at each other, and the other 2 hikers warned Mary against getting in the van with him alone, saying that they just had really bad vibes about that. There was no reason why he could only take one of them when he had this van. Well, being homesick like she was, exhausted and even overwhelmed, Mary actually went against her better judgment and her own instinct as well as the other hikers' instincts, and she climbed into the van. People that knew Larry said that really he was an easygoing guy when he was sober. So the morning that Larry picked Mary Vincent up hitchhiking, he had just left his own home after having an argument with his rebellious daughter. He filled up a milk carton with some liquor, and he was drinking from it as they drove. Mary didn't really care, to be honest, and actually she just fell asleep while they were traveling. After a very short nap, Mary woke up and she noticed that the road signs were the total opposite direction as to which they were supposed to be going. She then quickly noticed that Larry's voice had changed. It was quite different, almost like a different person. He was being ruthless and mean with his words now. The road signs Mary was seeing showed that they were actually going in a complete opposite direction than what they should have been, and this really made Mary mad. She looked around her seat and in the floorboard, and she found like this stick. She picked it up and she pointed it towards Larry, and she said, "I can take care of myself. Turn around right now." Mary was actually very shocked when Larry actually done exactly what she told him to do. And then Larry said, "I'm just an honest man who made an honest mistake. I'm not going to hurt you." This made Mary feel a little bit more at ease, so she settled back into her seat and watched the road as Larry drove. Just as the sun looked like it was trying to set, Larry pulled off of the freeway and he turned onto this old deserted looking road that was leading down a narrow canyon-like road. When Mary looked at Larry, he said, "I have to use the bathroom." But when they stopped the car and he got out on his side, Mary went ahead and got out on her side, and she relieved herself there on the side of the road. When she started to stand back up, she noticed that her shoe was untied. So she stood up and leaned down to tie her shoe. While she was tying her shoe, she felt an immense crushing pain in her back. And then almost immediately following that, there was a hard, extreme blow to the back of her head. Larry had hit her in the back of the head and the back with a sledgehammer. Mary was barely able to stand, and Larry pulled her up on her feet. He slid the back of the van door open and said, "Get in and don't scream or I will kill you." Within only a few seconds, heard him awing her over and over and over again all night until he finally went to sleep. Mary laying there, tied up, listening to him sleep, knowing there was literally no way to escape the way he had her tied. She just laid there in pain from the blow to the back of her head and her back, as well as the shock and pain of being awed over and over and over. Tears rolling down her face. She could not sleep. She only wished for death. When Larry woke up, he awed her more. Then he got back into the driver's seat of the van, still nude, and he drove a few more miles down this small canyon road, and then he stopped again. This whole time, Mary is begging him to set her free. "Please set me free." Larry told her that he would set her free if she obeyed him, and he cut the ropes off of her wrist. After her hands were free, he took a cup and he poured some of his liquor from his milk carton into it, handed it to her, and told her to drink it or he would kill her. Mary drank the cup of liquor, and Larry awed her again. At this point, Mary was so shocked and terror by the awing that she had continuously endured. The pain in her back, the pain in her head, her body literally limp and weak. All she could do was lay there and cry, begging Larry to set her free. Larry told Mary, "Get out of the van and don't try to run. It won't do you any good. Get out and lay there on the side of the road with your hands out beside you, each side." So Mary got out, scared to death, still begging to be set free, laying on her back with her arms stretched to her sides. She could hear Larry go to the back of his van, get in the van, moving some things around, and then get back out of the van and walk back over towards her. He had his hands behind his back, and he said, "Want to be free? I'll set you free." Larry then raised his arms up over his back and head and came down with one hard hack onto her left arm, cutting her arm off right underneath her elbow. She screamed excruciating pain, seeing her severed arm projecting blood. Larry laughed and done the same thing to her right arm. At this point, she had started to slide down and fall off of the cliff with what was left of her right hand. She grabbed his forearm as tight as she could and held on for dear life. But she said it was so odd to her because she could feel herself falling down this ravine, but she could still see that her hand was holding onto his arm so tight. And then she realized that her arm was not attached to her body any longer. Larry made his way down the ravine, grabbed her and pulled her on down into the bottom of it. With her hands still clenched to his forearm, she watched him literally flicking his arm so her hand, her severed hand, would fall off of his arm. When he flicked her hand off of his own arm, he went back up. He got in the van and he drove off, but not before telling her You're free now." He left her to die, bleeding profusely, her feeling every ounce of pain, fright, shock, but she made herself stay awake. She told herself, "There's no way you can just lay here and bleed out and die. You have to live. You have to survive, or he's going to do this to so many others." Mary bends down and puts her stumps in dirt, packing her gaping wounds with dirt, hoping that the blood will form like a mud and stop the bleeding. She does this with both. She's going to have to get back up this cliff with no hands. She's going to have to hold what's left of her arms over her head so the bleeding doesn't continue and she bleed out, as well as her literal muscles were slipping out of the gaping holes in her arms. So somehow, by the grace of God, she was able to make it back up that 30-foot ravine that she was at the very bottom of, with no hands, holding what was left above her head. Somehow she made it up this ravine. By now it was very dark. This was a very, very deep in the woods road, not used very often at all. Pitch black. She's walking. She can hear traffic, so freeway somewhere. So she follows the sound of the cars going down the freeway, hoping, praying that somebody will drive by. She literally walks hours on this dark, desolate road, following the sound of traffic. Just as the sun was coming up, she heard there was a vehicle on this road headed in her direction, like sporty car convertible. And then she could tell there was like two guys in the car. She started screaming, "Help! Help! Help me!" When they got up close enough to see her, and they seen she was naked, covered in blood literally from head to toe, holding what was left of her arms above her head, they sped off immediately, possibly terrified that whatever happened to her would happen to them too if they stopped, so they sped away. At that point, Mary almost lost all hope, thinking nobody is going to stop and help me, even if they do see me. I look like something out of an axe murderer horror movie, and actually she was, but a real life horror movie. She continued to walk, feeling like she was about to just fall out. She had lost so much blood, not to mention not eating, no hydration, all of the wounds, the back of her head, her back, and when she fell down the ravine, she had broken 4 ribs as well. She walked for a while longer and she heard another car and prayed to God this one may stop and help her. She started screaming, and sure enough, they did. It was a couple that were on their honeymoon, and the only reason they were even on that road, they were lost, is because they had made a wrong turn getting back on the freeway. So they got Mary in their car, some linens that they had in their vehicle. They started trying to put around her stumps that had already started bleeding profusely again, and they raced her to the nearest phone booth, because there again, these people were lost. They did not know where they were at, so they just went to a phone booth and they called 911. They told them what was going on, and they sent in a helicopter, and they life-flighted Mary to the nearest hospital. When the helicopter got to Mary and they were asking her, obviously asking her questions, as well as just trying to get her to stay awake and alert, asking her what happened to her, who done this to you, and the only thing she could manage to even get out at that time was, "He R'd me. He R'd me." Later on, while she was still in the hospital, she was able to provide to law enforcement a very detailed description. Lawrence Singleton. When this sketch made it to the public's eye view, the people in the community immediately recognized who he was just from this police sketch. It actually ended up being his neighbor that called in with the tip, telling them what his name was and where he was located. Within 2 weeks of her attack, Mary, learning and using the prosthetic arms that she had been given, while she was in the hospital recovering. It took Mary many years to even be able to talk about what had happened to her. She was refusing to do any sort of interviews or to even speak to the media. What this man done to Mary was far more than just leaving her maimed and taking her arms. He had destroyed her life mentally and physically. When Lawrence Singleton was released, Mary was living in a small town where no one really even knew what her name was, and definitely not her story. She was living on welfare. Mary had not flourished as a superhero survivor. Mary had not met her knight in shining armor to rescue her from the demons that lived forever in her mind. She had not signed these big movie or book deals. No, none of this. Mary lived in seclusion and in a hell in her own mind she could not escape or be released from. Mary was totally consumed in anger that her life was what it now was because of the one stupid mistake that she made on that morning in 1978. And now it was 9 years later, and Mary still had these horrific nightmares. She would wake up in cold sweats, and on one occasion, she had even broken one of her own ribs from jolting herself straight up in the bed awake during one of the night terrors she just could not overcome. The accident, as Mary refers to what happened to her, never left her mind. While Mary and her family were living in their own mental hell, Larry was being guarded around the clock, and he had spent his last year on parole in a trailer on the grounds of San Quentin. He was living comfortably under a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew. He was able to go out 2 or 3 times a week for groceries, and he could even go see a movie if he wanted to. And of course, this was paid for by his disability benefits and even cash that was being put into his account sent by his family. Larry also joined Alcoholics Anonymous just to help pass the time. Only 5 months after she was released from the hospital, she was summoned to appear in court for the trial against Lawrence. The charges he was facing were sodomy, oral copulation, kidnapping, mayhem, and attempted murder. While Mary sat in the courtroom, the recording of Larry's statement to police was played for all in the courtroom to hear. Hearing her attacker lie in his statement was almost more than she could even bear to listen to. This is, in part, what Lawrence told the police in his statement. And I quote, "That girl right there is a hard-ass runaway who smoked reefers and threatened to maim me and accused me of rape. And if I refused to drive her to Los Angeles, she had had sex with 2 other scruffy hitchhikers, and I figured that's who later on attacked her. Then she offered to have sex with me as well." He went on to say that Mary was nothing but a sex worker and denied that he had committed any kind of crime. He also maintained that someone else had been in the car and Mary had threatened him with false accusations. Larry even went as far as calling Mary a $10 a night whore. He took the stand at the trial, still being only 15 years old and barely able to get many words out of her mouth at all at first, from this huge lump in her throat and being seated in front of the man that had done this to her, only 10 or 15 foot away. When she was asked to describe who done this to her, and she pointed at him with her prosthetic arm, you could hear her pin drop in the courtroom. She was asked to describe her R's to the court, and at first she could only make out, "It hurt. It hurt." The only name that she would refer to Lawrence as is "my attacker," and she declared with a very firm voice, "He did this to me." And then she held up both of her prosthetic arms. Ultimately, Mary was finally able to tell the jury everything in detail that Larry had done to her, while her family listened. After the jury read the verdict and the presiding judge sentenced him to 14 years in prison, which was the maximum allowed by law in California at that time, the judge made a remark. Quote, "If I had the power, I would send you to prison for the rest of your natural life." End quote. Mary also won a $2.56 million civil judgment against Lawrence Singleton, but Mary would never collect on this when he claimed that he was unemployed, in poor health, and only had $200 in savings. After the verdict was read, Mary quickly left the courtroom. As she was walking out, she had to pass, almost sideswipe, Lawrence Singleton. Lawrence made a quiet comment to her, and he later actually admitted that he did say this to her as they were walking out of the courtroom. And what he said was, quote, "I'll finish this job if it takes me the rest of my life." End quote. While Larry was incarcerated at San Quentin and was serving his sentence, Mary and her family were falling apart. She was terrified, anxious, nervous, and always on guard. She felt isolated at this new handicap school. Mary's mother, Lucy, said that Mary had started seeing a psychiatrist, and the therapy sessions would bring back these memories right back to her. Traumatized and depressed, she developed an eating disorder, and she even had trouble even walking out of her house. Any relationship that she was able to get into ended up falling apart. She continued to struggle against her sense of isolation. And Mary said, "When this happened, all my old friends and everything's just changed. And I ended up having a whole different set of friends and a whole different life. It's like my old friends just hated me, or they were so uncomfortable just being around me that they couldn't deal with it. I actually felt like I was a public spectator." She had made a few new friends in her carefully protected home. Others in the small community where she lived were unaware of her connection to Larry Singleton and his crimes. Mary said, "Most people know me because of who I am, not what happened to me. They just assume that I was born this way." She believes that to them, she is simply just a handicapped single mother. And when Larry was released from prison, it was not because she feared for herself, but she feared for her son, Luke. When he was released, she said, "I don't want anything to happen to him." Larry actually said to reporters, quote, "I wouldn't be a normal human being if I didn't work myself into a rage when I think of how I was treated by the courts and also in the media. I have spent 10 years of my life in prison, each day being taunted and threatened." After his release, Larry moved back to his home state of Florida. He was arrested in 1990. He was twice convicted of theft there. He served a 60-day sentence for stealing a $10 disposable camera in the spring of 1990. And then that same year, he received a 2-year prison term for stealing a $3 baseball hat. Before his sentencing for the last crime, he described himself to the judge as a confused, muddle-headed old man. But then, on February the 19th of 1997, and this was nearly 20 years after his attack on Mary and 10 years after he was released from San Quentin, Lawrence Singleton had lured a 31-year-old mother of three named Roxanne Haynes into his home in Sulphur Springs, Florida. He attacked her, and neighbors could hear her loud, piercing screams. When police arrived, they found Larry naked and covered in blood, with Roxanne's dead body lying on the floor. Larry had stabbed her multiple times in her upper body and in her torso. And shortly after Larry was incarcerated for Roxanne's murder, he attempted to take his own life, but he was unsuccessful. He was then housed in a psychiatric hospital. Mary voluntarily traveled from California to Tampa, Florida, to appear at the sentencing and testify on Roxanne's behalf. During her testimony, she described his attack on her and the toll and the ordeal that it had taken on her entire life. Larry's defense claimed that he never meant to kill Roxanne, that it was just a mistake, due to too much emotion at the time. The jury deliberated for 4 hours to come to a decision of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Lawrence Singleton was given a death sentence for the senseless and horrific murder of Roxanne Hayes. Larry appeared to not care when Judge Anderson passed down the sentence on him, and the judge says, and I quote, "This was an unprovoked, senseless killing of a human being," and at the age of 74 years old, Lawrence Singleton died from cancer while still on death row at a prison hospital at the North Florida Reception Center in Stark, Florida. Years after Mary's recovery, she got married, but she did later divorce. Her trauma had caused years of stress and depression. Eventually, she became a mother of 2 boys. Little girl, she always dreamed to become a dancer. But after her attack, portions of her legs had to be used to reconstruct her arms. That ended her childhood dreams of dancing. However, she did find a creative outlet that she enjoyed in painting, drawing, and sketching. Mary has created artworks of everything, from commissioned family portraits to action figures of very powerful women. Lawrence Singleton never ever showed 1 ounce of remorse for what he'd done to Mary. He always remained adamant that he was innocent and he was the victim in this case, not Mary. Many people, including myself, believe that Mary and Roxanne were not Larry's only victims, that he could be responsible for dozens or more murders. The direct result of this sentencing, the quote-unquote Singleton Bill, was drafted. This bill stops the early release of perpetrators who commit a crime that involves torture. Mary was a strong supporter of this California bill, and now the minimum sentence for any crime that involves torture is 25 years. Today, Mary is an accomplished artist with 2 adult sons. She has heroically overcame so much, and she speaks openly now about finding her healing by becoming a victim's advocate in support of victims' rights. And she delivers motivational speeches. She is also a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and she considers herself to be a hobbit at home. Mary is now finally open about her trauma, saying that she struggled for too many years after the attack. But her art and raising a family has helped her to heal and grow. She works with chalk pastels to create powerful, upbeat women like female action figures. She also draws family and individual portraits for the public on commission. Her customized prosthetics are her own self-creations. She has even designed and created a prosthetic arms for bowling. Mary admits that while Larry Singleton's death did not grant her the peace that she would hoped it would, she said that the relief she saw wash over her son's face when they learned that he was gone for good may just be enough for her too.
When I wake up, I'm haunted when I'm sleeping. It won't leave. I can't escape it. I wake up to it every day. Just waking up to no hands.
It was an act that was brutal and heartless beyond belief. The crime committed against Mary Vincent has left her marked for life.
And I think of a young woman who has become a mother as a child and has never touched that child with her fingers or her thumb or caressed it with her hands. Instead, it's a prosthetic device. That's what I think about when I think about Mary Vincent.
District Attorney Don Stahl still cannot fathom the tragedy of Mary Vincent. It was the summer of 1978. Mary Vincent was a fiercely independent but naive 15-year-old.
I wanted to go home. That's the only thing that was in my mind, is that I wanted to go home. I remember everything, every detail. Excuse me, I need some water. Okay, I'll get you water.
Today, the crime is difficult to discuss. That is why Mary has never spoken to anyone about the details before. But she decided that she wanted us to understand what she's been through. Vincent did not. Mary remembers a Corvette convertible coming toward her.
And I screamed to stop, to help me. And I was thinking, gosh, I must look a mess. They're going to get scared, and they did get scared, and they drove off. I told myself maybe if I'm nicer and I ask police to help.
It was a miracle Mary survived, but she would never recover from the gruesome attack that robbed her of the chance to ever again run her fingers through her hair, caress a child's face, or hold a lover's hand. All of this brings Mary great pain.
You told me you thought about suicide.
Yes, I have. He took away my life. I mean, this isn't living, this is existing.
Did he say anything to you while the crime was occurring? Remember it all?
Well, while he was attacking me, he was telling me that I'm going to be his good little girl. He was talking as though I was one of his kids.
Ironically, Singleton has a daughter Mary's age. After her harrowing ordeal, Mary faced her attacker in court. She was determined to see him punished.
I can recall her eyes just almost growing. And then she pointed to him, and she did it with the prosthetic devices. And she did it so directly. I think everybody's heart stopped.
I saw that. Just pure hate, pure evil.
How many times have you moved in the last 15 years?
Too many to remember. Just every time I move, there's always something I have to leave behind.
In 1988, Mary Vincent got married. Today at 31, she is divorced, the mother of 2 children whose faces she asked us not to show. She's been on and off welfare for years.
I have to work 10 times harder than the average person with hands to do anything, to fold clothes, do dishes.
Mary's injuries still require constant attention. Her prosthetic arm should be replaced every year, but the staggering cost has made that impossible. Afraid she'll be tracked down by Singleton, Mary is always looking over her shoulder.
Do you have a dream for the future?
I had a dream once. I've had a lot taken from me, and I think I deserve just a chance to see if I can make a go of it.
What comforts you?
My children. My children comfort me. They see the stressed looks on their moms' faces and they come up, give me a hug.
I was a runaway at 14, and it was like a couple months before my 15th birthday. I decided to go home, and that's when I started hitchhiking and got a ride from Lawrence Singleton. And I was begging for my life, asking him to set me free. And he replied, "You want to be set free? I'll set you free." And he lifted up a hatchet, and that's when I tried fighting him off and was kicking and screaming, but I was realizing, wait a minute, I'm still holding onto his hand, but I'm laying on the ground. That if he were to do this to somebody else, they wouldn't survive it, and I don't know if I'm going to survive this. So I had to get up as quickly as I could to get help, and I climbed out of the culvert and up the cliff. The way the detectives told me, they traced the blood going back up, and I said, I don't know how you did it, but you did it.
Here, he's a real gentleman. I know he loves the heck out of you. Kurt, would you come up here, please? Nice to meet you. All right, you look good with lipstick on, Kurt. All right. She loves you. You love her. It's about time there was some joy in this woman's life.
Thank you so much for watching, and do not forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave us a comment below on your thoughts of this video. And until next time, this is UnJustified.